Sean, we've just come out of your panel where you have been called the grandfather of green bonds. So I'm wondering, is this year's edition of the CEE Summit is focused on putting sustainability from the regulations and frameworks into actual business practice. How can the green bond market help facilitate that?
Look, green bonds are a great way for companies and governments that are doing something to get attention, get support, get preferential investment. It gets going on the financing road train. And these are incredibly successful. You know, the Hungarian treasurer who was speaking on our panel tells me that when they issued their green panda bond in Chinese yuan, they got the lowest interest rate they'd ever received. In their euro issuance, they just issued a euro issuance in January. They had investors lining up. But it grows, it's a journey. You bring people along. Take again Hungary. When they issued their first bond, they had an investor conference, they had a few people turn up. Second bond, a dozen. Third bond in January, 30 people, 30 investors. And so that's the point of it getting going. Of course, what we need to do is something rather large, transform our societies to become low carbon and climate resilient. That is tough. Green bonds get you started on the journey, get people engaged, get enthusiasm, show where the money is, the financing is, and lay the foundation for the really hard work that we now all have to do in the context of our climate challenges, which is figure out how we're going to transition our industries, what our urban environment is going to look like in 30 years' time. Because it'll be different. You know, Prague is going to get hotter. In summer, we're not going to be able to survive without air conditioning or cooler buildings because we're going to get 35, 40 degree heat for a week on end. That requires some major changes. We've got to prepare, we've got to plan, we've got to develop transition plans. That's the next stage. But so far, it's really exciting. And this conference, what a conference. It's so successful. It's the crowd that's arrived, the build-up in the last few years. It's really heartening to see the continuing strengthening of interest in this topic.
And you mentioned Prague, where CEE Summit takes place, and this is the 4th edition this year. What do you find exciting about the CEE Summit actually happening in the Central and Eastern European region and in Prague specifically?
Well, Eastern Europe is the area of greatest potential for transition, but also the area of greatest need in many ways. Our economies still haven't fully transitioned from the Soviet era. We have housing stock in so many parts of Poland or Slovakia, which hasn't been properly refurbished yet, for example. We have industries that are still, let's call it 20th century focused, not 21st century focused, and so on. But it also means the gains are great. So take energy efficiency. We can actually, with the appropriate levels of investments, substantially reduce energy bills in Eastern Europe when energy bills have been skyrocketing. Right? These are things we can do. It's easier here than in places like Netherlands or Germany, where they've already made some changes in the past. In industry, you know, we're hungry in Eastern Europe for work, for jobs, for wealth creation, for business opportunities, and so on. We can feed that and make sure that it goes in a green direction. Preferential capital. But I also want to put something else in the conception of Europe. We need Europe to be a global leader. It needs to be a global leader to ensure that it can have an economic future which is wealthy and vibrant. Part of that requires close working relationships with Africa and others, where the growth is going to be stratospheric in the next 30 years. You know, for Africans, Europe usually means France, the UK and Germany. There's a colonial overhead. But changing the perception of Europe depends on active participation by Eastern Europe to puncture that perception.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I hear the gong for the next session, so thank you again.